What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hartness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show are Rod Butche and Nikesh Patel, and we speak about the Fidelity International's Facilitation Academy, how to grow facilitation skills at scale within a company of over 10,000 people. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, Rod. Hello, Nikesh.
Hi there.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Exciting.
I know. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yes, we are sitting here in London,
Well, hey.
Yeah.
in the heart of London, to record a in-person episode on the Facilitation Academy that you built and are about to scale to train in-house facilitators for Fidelity International. And I'm excited to know everything about it and to share with the audience. And before we are getting there, I always start with the same question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So about 4 years ago, I was working in consulting and I was thrown into a 4-day workshop as my first week with the client. At this point, I didn't know what facilitation was. I was managing a group, and turns out I made every mistake a facilitator can make in those 4 days. Having come out of that experience, I realized what I was doing was facilitating. And from that moment on, I facilitated more workshops, more meetings. And so I think that's when I first indirectly called myself a facilitator, because I was managing a group, guiding them, made a lot of mistakes, such as pretending I knew what the subject matter was, not managing group dynamics the right way. But I think if I was to look back at my first facilitation experience and when I was a true facilitator, I think it was in that experience of a 4-day workshop.
Wonderful. And I would love to come back to these mistakes and whether we can actually train someone to avoid them or whether this is how we actually learn to be a facilitator.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rod, how about you?
So I think I'll be a bit contrary. I'm not sure I do call myself a facilitator. My job is head of service design, so I'll probably call myself a service designer. And for us, facilitation is an absolutely critical skill to be a great service designer. But I think it's important to position us as we're here for more than just workshops. That's why I'm sometimes slightly nervous about saying I'm a facilitator, because you kind of open the door to the wrong kind of demand.
And I get this answer a lot, actually. And it's an interesting differentiation between I do facilitate and I am a facilitator. And I would expect many of your colleagues calling you a facilitator, or would they call you a service designer?
They would probably still call me a bit of both, to be honest with you. And that's partly because of how we've grown over the last few years, because I've got to do some very, very high profile events. And that's what opens up the door, really. So you get that kind of profile. And then I've had to almost reposition myself sometimes and say, you know, we will facilitate, but it's more than just an event. It's more than a workshop. So that's why it's important to keep reminding people that we use facilitation to serve a bigger thing, which is, you know, helping the organization design better experiences and better services.
So basically, facilitation is the skill you're using. The workshop is the medium you're using to achieve a higher goal, which is, in your case, designing a service.
Yeah, that's right. And we always say that a workshop shouldn't just be viewed in isolation. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's an event, but it's critically important to plan what happens before as well as what happens afterwards. So it's part of a flow. And that's why I think talking about service design is often quite beneficial for us.
And when came the moment that you thought that it would be beneficial for the organization as a whole to help staff members learn facilitation skills? And where would you draw the line of the facilitation skills? Is it then for workshops, for service design workshops? Or what was the idea behind that?
I think to go first, a lot of the skills that we train on the academy are primarily to be used in meetings as well as workshops. And so the percentage split we normally give it is 70% of the learnings can be applied in day-to-day meetings, and then 30% could be used in bigger, larger, higher, medium profile workshops. And so if I think of my experiences, I think in day-to-day meetings, I use a lot of the facilitation skills that you'd use in a workshop, but in day-to-day meetings. And I think that's where a lot of the value comes in day-to-day work life. When you have bigger workshops with larger groups, bigger challenges, bigger problems, that's when you're still facilitating, but in a slightly different medium, is what I'd say.
Yeah, and I think for us that we always want to give a service design tinge or flavour to how we facilitate. So we have a whole set of principles that they're not ours, but we've developed. And the one that always lands incredibly well is falling in love with the problem. And that's a great thing for a facilitator to be able to do. So to take a group of people and get them, in a sense, to slow down and stop falling in love with their own solutions, but instead start with discovery and really understanding the problem. Whose problem is it? Why it's a problem? What if we did nothing? What are the root causes? So that's a good example of how we try and blend the art of questioning, the art of guiding a group collaboratively with the key service design principles that are going to help the organization ultimately make better decisions.
And it sounds as if there's more to that than pure facilitation skills. It almost sounds like a cultural shift or a cultural change to help an organization to fall in love with the problem.
It is, yeah. I think everybody loves what we do, and people love being challenged. And maybe we're incredibly lucky working for an organization like this. But I find that if we adopt those kind of fall in love with the problem, start with the user, stop being an expert, all those kinds of principles that we weave into how we facilitate, you get a really engaged audience, a really engaged group of people that you're working with. And I think that's really important. So I think combining it with those kinds of principles to better serve the customer and to help change the mindset in the organization, that's critical. And people love that. In my experience, they love being challenged and they love the provocation and they love it when we tell people to slow down, all those kinds of things. But obviously you've got to set the ground right before you do that kind of thing.
And when you say customer, you mean the internal as much as the external customer?
Yes, both. Yeah. Both. So we do a lot of work internally, but obviously there's always an outcome that's customer focused as well. So it can be both.
And listening to you, it almost sounds as if the Facilitation Academy is like a Trojan horse. So you bring in facilitation skills and what you get is an entire cultural shift.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Kesh...
It's the catalyst, you could argue, right?
Yeah.
So like Rod mentioned, that mindset shift is something so important that we try train in the academy. And so in the academy, there's 3 pillars. You have mindset, skill set, and tool set. And so that mindset aspect of being a facilitator is so important because when it comes to, like Rod said, falling in love with the problem, you want individuals to be empowered to ask any stakeholder the right questions to make sure you're going on that journey in the correct way. And I think as a facilitator, that's what you're empowered to do. At the beginning of a project, asking those difficult questions, whereby if you didn't have that mindset and you hadn't developed that mindset, you would probably find it a little bit more difficult. And so mindset, I'd say, is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I'd add another word that we often use is liberating. It's incredibly liberating, I think, if you take people into the academy, they're not quite sure what they've signed up for, but then they begin to realize that it's a liberating thing for them because it gives them that, like you say, that autonomy. It gives them that power to challenge. It's not a meeting, it's a workshop. So it's about directing the flow. It's about pausing, adapting, changing the direction, all of those things. It's incredibly liberating. So as long as we can give people that sufficient starting point of confidence, then we see them grow. But I think it's really great when people realize that it's in their control and it's a liberating thing for them to be able to be a great facilitator.
Yeah. I can also imagine that it's liberating also to have the permission that you went through a training like that. So you adopted the skill set, the mindset, the tool set, and now you have official permission to actually use that and to change the meetings that you are in, that you might have been suffering from. And now you can actually redesign them. And a meeting can be a service, an internal service. So we are redesigning the way you conduct meetings internally.
And I think in the academy, and just in the way we developed it, and just in general, right, it's the little things that go the furthest, right? So when it comes to a facilitator, it's the little nuances, the little tips, the little tricks that you learn over time, but that we're training in the academy, that when people are now in their meetings, it's those little things that go the furthest. And without those little things, it could make your meeting so much more complicated, make workshops fail. But with these little things, when they come off the academy and they have that in their toolkit, they're a lot more empowered to utilize them, to learn from them, practice with them, and also experience the value, right? So when we talk about little things, we talk about using people's names, for example, silent brainstorm, right? For example. And so I remember in my first workshop, people left the workshop, the sponsors, saying they're going to use a silent brainstorm at home with their kids and their wives, right? And so, or husbands. Yeah. I'm talking to partners. I'm talking to the actual individual, which is why I said ours. But this guy was so motivated, so inspired by some of these techniques. Yeah. He went home, used it, had Post-its out, and utilized the value of silent brainstorm at home. And so that goes to the skills not only being applied in the professional context, but in the personal context as well.
I mean, workshop is such a loaded word, isn't it? People get very hung up on the concept of a workshop. And a lot of people come to us, a lot of senior people saying, I want a workshop. And then we have to kind of talk them down from that and really understand them. So we quiz them. But you're right. Sometimes it's just a small thing in a meeting and it just makes all the difference. And then people begin to think, it's not such a big, scary thing. It's all the little things that add up.
I would like to park what you've just said about talking them down. Maybe it's not a workshop that they need, and I would love to come back to that. And before getting there, I was wondering, how did you get the buy-in on both ends? So for those who want to acquire the skills, and especially since workshops is a loaded skill, facilitation skills, not everyone might know what facilitation skills are good for. And I can only imagine that it's quite difficult to internally sell an academy on mindset.
Yeah, I'll start by answering that because I pitched for it originally. And the reason was very simple. We are such a small team. And as I said, we have done some very high profile events, for the top 200 leaders globally, that kind of thing. Then you get people knocking on your door. So the original reason I pitched it was we need to get more people who have these skills so that we can be freer to do our service design job. So it was about how can we build an academy, get people to begin to experience those skills. And then Kesh gets a contract signed. So there's a contract with the individual and the individual says, I will do my best to use these skills thereafter, but equally with the manager of the individual. So the manager has a role to play to find opportunities for that individual thereafter, thereby helping spread the skills, helping people grow their skills after the academy. But the other big angle is career development. So you asked, how do we get people to even want to do it? This is a fantastic skill to have. It's an amazing skill to be able to lead in many cases, much more senior group of people creatively, collaboratively, to better decisions and to slow them down and to challenge them. It's a fantastic career development skill. And we've had no lack of pipeline, have we, in terms of the numbers of people that are keen to go on it?
No, absolutely. And I think at the absolute foundation of what every professional, you could argue, does in their day-to-day job, it's solving problems, right? And when we advertise facilitation, we say, do you want to improve your problem solving? Do you want to encourage participation from others? And do you want to learn the latest tools and techniques to do that? And that resonates with every professional because every professional is solving problems every day. The way you solve those problems has a direct impact on the outcome. So if you can solve problems in a more effective way, a more efficient way, in a more collaborative way, then now you're directing output, which then impacts the bottom line, the top line, collaboration, culture, all the good stuff that makes an organization operate.
And I think it's genius to focus on, and this might be your service design mindset, right? To focus on the problem you're solving with the academy instead of asking, do you want to learn how to facilitate? And everyone goes like, ma. And whom did you have to convince, in air quotes, at the first step? Because it's a large project. So Fidelity International has 10,000 people all over the globe. And you're now at the 5th cohort going through that. So it is a budget and it is a quite big project. Where did you have to start to get the buy-in from a leadership level? And what was this one argument that they could not say no to?
I'll answer that because I originally pitched for it. I have to say it wasn't difficult. This is a good company. This is a company that recognizes these kinds of issues. But I pitched it, apart from obviously to my boss, we are part of the global technology organization within the innovation group. So we went to the chief technology officer and his leadership team and just got a fantastic response, frankly. What was the one thing that really helped them say yes? I think it was probably the idea that we would put their teams on the first cohort. Mm-hmm. So we said, we'll give you this first service so that instead of having to come to us and us having to say we're too busy, you're going to find your own people helping you out more. So I think it was very much a homegrown initiative at the outset that drove most of the first cohort. Although I have to say, I think actually in retrospect, just remembering, we added people from outside the cohort of the technology team as well, because we thought it would be richer, more interesting. I mean, it's always global, so it's worth stressing that we're not doing it on a country by country basis, but also going outside tech for some of those first cohort participants was probably a good move as well.
I think in that experience as well, one thing that we always hear from participants is how the diversity in the cohort adds to the flavor and the experience of the training. So what people learn by being with other cultures, by being with people from different geographies, really helps them take the learnings away, because you are in a global workforce, you're in a global team, you work with different cultures, the way they perceive things are different. And that's really helped us. And so in Fidelity, there aren't loads of opportunities to network in a training context. And that's really helped us in the way that we've crafted the cohorts, not making it biased towards one geography, one gender, making it really diverse.
And what I also realized, maybe disclaimer. So I've been supporting you in this project. Yeah. So I know it also from the inside, is the opportunity to network within the organization and to build bridges between the different units in Fidelity. And I think this you have crafted really well, that now they're kind of colleagues who would never have collaborated with each other before. And through the academy now they can. So information also flows, I can imagine, easier throughout the organization.
You think about working in silos and that being a common issue. By having people across different departments, knowing what they do, knowing how they can help each other, that's really helpful, right, for an organization. And so when you've got people from all across the business working on one training, but sharing their experiences, that's really powerful. And I think that sharing of experiences in the training, in the breakouts, in the exercises, is where people learn about different contexts. So when you've got somebody from customer service saying, this is how I could use facilitation, and these are some of my experiences, when you take that to somebody who's a portfolio manager in another part of the business, then that's quite powerful, right? Because you've got different people sharing.
Yeah, I agree. Just to add to that, I think that's when the magic happens, when you see it, you sense it through the conversations, you watch the body language on a Zoom call. But it's when people start appreciating that that this is a universal skill to start with, but also there are lots of opportunities and lots of ways to learn. And that helps us as well, because our ambition, as we said earlier, is that after we've done the academy, it's like Rod and Nikesh cut themselves out of the loop because we want to get the demand going straight to facilitators wherever they are. But if they begin to build up those relationships amongst themselves, then they also know who they can talk to or who they could share experiences with. And that's really powerful. And actually today is a really important day for us because we're sitting here in London. And this afternoon, we've got our first ever Connect event, which is a live event. So some of our alumni from previous cohorts are coming to London. We're going to spend about 3 hours with them, kind of beer and pizza style event. But it'll be a chance for us just to get them in the room, talk about facilitation, try out some new icebreakers, all that kind of stuff. But again, you see, it's helping them build connections with each other, which is really important.
And what I hear is an internal community building as a side effect to the academy.
Absolutely. So we've now got 100 people, 100 facilitators in the global community. And when you've got that many people and you've got a Teams channel and you've got a platform for them to share, when people have questions, they can go to the community. So now myself and Rod aren't always the individuals answering. It's the community answering and helping each other. So when somebody's got an offsite coming up and they want to find out what's the best icebreaker to use or what's the best approach to take, they'll post it on the Teams channel and other people will contribute. So now we're learning from each other, and it's not just me and Rod being the ones sharing our insight. It's everyone sharing their insight.
So basically you have removed the bottleneck and are now sharing the responsibility of continuous development and learning with 100 people. And you have started a year ago? So 5 cohorts. When was the first cohort?
I believe it was
January
last year.
Yes, January last year.
2022.
2022, correct.
And how long for the preparation until the first cohort launched?
3 months.
6 since we started speaking.
Probably longer than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think August.
Yeah. Quite a lot of preparation, I would say. You know, lots of iteration as well. So quite a while. But it was this year, wasn't it? We did the first cohort.
Yeah. And just
so 100, we're aiming for about 120, aren't we, by the end of this year?
Yeah. And just to talk to the preparation, I think it was in January. One of the key decisions that was made was instead of doing it as quickly as we can, we took the logical and rational decision to wait until January when we felt we were ready to go after it. And since then, we've continued to improve it. But I think that decision early on, instead of rushing it and maybe having a cohort in November 2021, by delaying it by a couple of months and doing it when we felt we were really ready to do it. But again, not waiting too long, but again, not rushing into it. That's really important.
Slowing down to speed up.
Exactly.
And before moving onto the content side, I would be curious, and I'm sure that the audience would be curious, about the overall investment from both sides. What is the investment from the participants? So what are you actually expecting them? How much time would they need to invest? And maybe a rough idea of the overall investment from the business side. So Nikesh is working with a full-time equivalent on only that project, I imagine. How many other people are working on that? Just to have an idea if someone, hopefully in the audience, feels inspired.
Yeah. On the participant side, we asked participants to commit 3 hours a week for 7 weeks. So of the 3 hours a week, they join a 2-hour Zoom call, and the other hour is offline learning that they can get involved with at any point in their week. So really flexible, asynchronous content.
Online working, but not synchronous.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what you mean. Yeah. So 3 hours in total. And I think that number is really important because they're doing this alongside their day job as well. And so not making it too much so that they feel that they're putting a bit too much effort towards it, but not having it as 1 hour whereby we can't teach them and experience the learnings in real life. 7 weeks is because of the different modules that we train over the 7 weeks. And so for a participant, it's 21 hours, over a 7-week period.
Absolutely reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely reasonable. And over time, we've learned And so we've initially went with 70% asynchronous and 30% synchronous. Now it's probably about 60% asynchronous and 40% synchronous. And so with each cohort, we learn, we ask what works well. We make things optional if we feel that it doesn't add as much value as part of the offline curriculum. And we continue to add content as we see fit and change the curriculum as we see fit.
So in terms of the investment from Fidelity, it's evolved over time. So we have been working with you, Miriam, which has been amazing, helping us with the overall design and development. And now you attend a couple. So, and Kesh will probably talk in more detail later about which of those they are, so how the modules break down. But you certainly attend those. Kesh's time has probably reduced a little bit, but it's still probably the majority of her time, so about 60% or 2/3 of your time. So that's 60% of Kesh. And then across our team, so the service design team, whenever we do the workshops that Kesh mentioned, he'll turn to me and he'll turn to others in the team and he'll get us involved because we have to do breakouts and give feedback on exercises in these calls as well. So it's kind of spread across our own team, but I wouldn't say it's any bigger than that. So we're learning what works, we're refining what works, and we're beginning to get the percentages of our times down a bit. And of course, our overall ambition is, as we slowly merge into the background, our alumni step up as well, which is also part of the learning experience, part of the ambition.
Which really reflects the facilitator's mindset of enabling others to take the responsibility and accountability.
Exactly. And just to add to what Rod said, across the 7 weeks, we have 2 practice sessions. We have 1 practice session in the 3rd week, and we have 1 in the 7th week. And it's in those practice sessions where I rely on other members of the service design team, like Rod and our other team members around the world. However, in the last cohort, it was the first cohort where I brought in our alumni to do some of that observation and feedback giving.
Beautiful.
And so again, that's bringing our community in to these workshops and giving them the power to take their learnings, put it into practice in real life, come back to the workshops and provide feedback to new participants coming through the journey. And that takes a bit of burden off Rod and the rest of the team. And that brings our alumni group and makes them feel a lot more connected to the workshops. And for the most part, they're really keen to get involved, just making sure we manage the time appropriately, so that we're not taking too much of their time to do something like this.
Can I add something else that just feels connected to this point as well? And it's worth saying because it illustrates the quality of the people that we get on this academy. As I said earlier, we want people who have graduated to step up and be available. So as part of their agreement that they sign, they say, I'm available in principle to help out on big demand as and when it arrives. And we do get those kinds of events. So we had one in September. We had the top 200 people for a in-person conference. And we were asked to facilitate a 2.5-hour workshop. And so Kesh went to the alumni. We got quite a few people because we needed lots of facilitators. We got quite a few people who stepped up. And I remember there was one, because we always have a substitute bench as well. And as inevitably happens on the day, we were sitting in this building actually doing our last minute rehearsals and role plays or whatever. And on the day, one facilitator dropped out. We reached out to this fabulous person in our substitute bench and said, can you get yourself to London? And we'll help you get ready. I said, yeah, I'll come over. So she just stepped up on the morning and she said, I don't need to get ready because I am ready. If you're always ready, you don't need to get ready. So she was fabulous. And that's a testament to the quality, both of the training that you guys have developed, but also the people that go on the academy. And they really do embrace this idea of being available and ready to help or ready to develop their skills still further. So I think that's a really important point to stress.
Yeah. I think just to add that as well, to add a bit of context on how highly thought of facilitation is in Fidelity. For this in-person event, we flew people over from India Luxembourg, Germany, Ireland to facilitate in this event, right? And that's amazing. And that goes to show how much value is added to facilitators, what they can add to that event, and how needed they are, and the budget that goes along with that.
Exactly. And also how well perceived it is. So, not going to name names, but we've got a few people now who are working for very senior people who are now saying, I need to be on this academy. When can you fit me in? So the battle is beginning to be won, because if you can get very senior people and their direct reports involved in this, then, like you say, the profile is there, the recognition of the value of this kind of this skill and this mindset that we've helped begin to grow in the organization is clear.
And the beauty that I see as a corollary is that if the high profile people join the academy and get connected with the others. So again, it's for the leadership to understand what's happening on the floor. And also, I think the more leaders understand the value of facilitation, the more facilitation will emerge in the organization, and hence better meetings, better workshops will be there. And I think of it like cooking. If I'm a hobby cooker, if I really know how to cook, I will value the ingredients and I will value the good cuisine more. So if the leaders learn to facilitate, they will appreciate good facilitation more.
Exactly. And I think you just mentioned it there, Miriam. When you experience something and you experience something good, great, you want to know how did you learn that, right? So what made you do it that way? And I think with the facilitators that are now in the organization, they're leading meetings in different ways. And that creates a domino effect. It creates a spider web whereby you've got people now experiencing things differently. And they're probably asking themselves, oh, that's a new way of doing things. So what made you do it that way? And so now they're having the seed put in their head. And a lot of our demand now comes from word of mouth. So people experiencing it in different contexts and wondering, I want to learn that. And so they will message me and Rod or register for the academy. And so you have to see it, you have to experience it to then know what's effective. And that will help drive, hopefully, a domino effect outside of the facilitator pool.
Beautiful. And I remember that I parked two things. I parked Nikesh's mistakes at your very, very first workshop. And I would love to hear from you how you help facilitators to make or maybe to avoid mistakes. So how do they actually learn? And then come back to the downgrading. What is it that you're actually selling if it's not a workshop?
So I'll go first with my mistakes. So like I said, it was my first week in the job, my first experience of a workshop, my first design thinking exercises, and my first time facilitating before I knew what facilitation was, right? And so I'm there managing a group in a breakout. It's an in-person meeting and workshop. And I'm making every rookie mistake you can make, right? So I'm not comfortable with silence. As soon as it goes quiet, I'm coming in there, right? And I'm saying something, and I'm probably saying the wrong thing, right? Because I'm not really I'm not actively listening, right? When somebody else is speaking, I'm thinking about the next question, right? So I'm there straight away. As soon as they start talking, I'm thinking, what am I going to ask next, right? So again, no active listening. Then I was in a group with a couple of very powerful, strong-worded individuals and a few quieter individuals. Now, when the stronger individuals wanted their idea to be taken forward, I wasn't very good at bringing other people into the conversation, right? And again, this is all stuff you learn by experience. So when you've got an in-person workshop and you're in a breakout and you've got two people having a side conversation and three people committing to the activity, it's your job as a facilitator to make sure that you're not losing what the two individuals are talking, right? And bringing them into the conversation. And so this is all stuff that you learn by being thrown in the deep end. And I think that's how a lot of my facilitation skills have been developed, by experience, by practice, by making mistakes, right? And so it's appreciating failure, knowing when you've done things wrong. But like we do in the academy, it's having people around you who can give you that real feedback. And I think that's what we've integrated into the academy as well, where when they practice, And when we do role play, we give them feedback straight after. When we complete the academy, we get feedback from participants on how they think we can improve. So by having that one eye on how you can improve as a facilitator at all times, I don't think I'll ever be the best facilitator because I think I'm always learning, right? And even to this day, there's still a lot I can learn, right? And so those are some of the mistakes that come to mind in my first facilitation experience. The only thing I'll add is about subject matter. I went into this workshop and it was about procurement and I knew nothing about procurement. And don't ask why, but in those first few exercises, I must have pretended or I wanted to come across like I knew about procurement. But that's not your job as a facilitator. You're guiding, you're managing. You shouldn't need to know about the subject matter. But in that situation, I felt the need to. And it's, again, things you learn over time.
I think, I can so much relate to that. Our own insecurity, especially when we're beginning facilitators, we have the impression that we need to prove ourselves. And it's only later that we learn that we do more by doing less.
Exactly. Correct.
Exactly. And just a few things to add to that, because I completely agree. I often use a phrase which is deliberately dumb. As in, I say to people, my job is to be deliberately dumb. The last thing you need in this event is another expert. This room is full of them, and you have to let go of your own expertise, but it's our job to be dumb. And that enables us to, ask the stupid questions, which are never stupid. It enables us to challenge the group. And I think one of the things that we often see people in the academy gradually realizing is that they're not responsible for the outcomes in the sense of the content. They're responsible for the process, but being told you're not actually responsible for the outcomes, in other words, it's not your workshop, it's theirs, is incredibly liberating. Because sometimes the best thing you can do in a workshop is actually say, hang on, guys, let's just do a quick process check here. This doesn't feel to me as if it's working. How does it feel to you? And that's quite a liberating thing. It takes a bit of bravery to do. But actually, the getting across the point that it's your workshop, you can decide to walk out of this room. So if it's not working for you, tell me why. And then, of course, people will rally round because I hate to walk out of a workshop. But that kind of the confidence to know that it's not your workshop, it's theirs, and just helping the group should be a really liberating, empowering thought.
Yeah. And what I hear, it also reduces the judgment of the facilitator towards the group that ideas are not good enough or they're not proceeding fast enough. Because if the facilitator is not attached to the outcome, then everything is okay. Everything becomes good enough suddenly. And I think this then translates into a liberation for the participants. Let me dig a little bit deeper when you just mentioned walking out of a workshop. What makes a workshop fail?
I'll start. I think if you're thinking about the role of the facilitator, I would say lack of preparation. And it comes back to this point earlier that people often say, I want a workshop. And you have to get into a really deep conversation with that person to understand why they want a workshop, because a workshop doesn't solve anything on its own. It's just a catalyst. Therefore, I think the preparation that a good facilitator makes is so critical. And that means sitting down with the sponsor. So I used to joke with people who said, I want a workshop. I said, okay, let's have a meeting and I'm going to take 20 minutes to convince you why you don't need a workshop, why you don't need us. Because it's only by having that open conversation that you really understand why they think a workshop is the solution. So you're asking the questions around, what's the problem? Why is it a big deal? What if nothing happened? And also, what is success for you? That's a critical question. So when you walk out of this event, what do you want to feel? Where do you want to be? And then, of course, in most situations, people begin to appreciate that a workshop on its own won't achieve much. So that's why I say preparation, because you need to get to the point of being very clear about what work is required before, as well as obviously where it's going to go afterwards.
I love that you try to convince them that they don't need a workshop. And I would be curious in some of your teasers or your challenges. Okay, you don't need a workshop because. And I would be curious to hear from you how you prepare them for the work that has to come afterwards. So their commitment that the real work actually starts after the workshop. And then I hear from Nikesh about his failed workshop definition.
Okay, so ways to ask those difficult questions, I guess. I think the most common scenario that we used to find, if I roll back a couple of years, was someone saying, I want a workshop. And the more you have the conversation with them about why, the more you realize that the train has left the station and they're using a workshop as a way just to sort of rub a stamp or validate something. But I used to say to people, has the train really left the station? Because if it has, we can't help you hugely with our flavor of service design, because for us, it's all about starting with the problem, understanding, interrogating the problem. If actually it turns out that you've got a solution and you just want people to nod their heads, that's not a workshop that we would want to associate ourselves with. So I think the biggest question is always, at what point are you bringing us into this process? And we can add the most value at the start of this process. And we don't even necessarily want to start with a workshop. So one of our go-to methods or approaches is often stakeholder interviews. So before you get a bunch of senior, opinionated people in a room, you first of all want to do a one-to-one open discussion stroke interview with them and really understand, how would they frame the problem? What words do they use when you ask them a question like, why is this a big deal? And what would success be for you? And even ask them questions like, why do you think we need a workshop here? So I think it's all about challenging what can be too easy a conclusion from someone that says, I want a workshop.
And if I understand correctly, when in the past and probably until today, those who have the impression that you said the train left the station, they want a workshop to basically clean up and to enroll those into a decision that has already been made. So obviously it's not a workshop because it would be facilitated manipulation. What is it that they need in this case? So what would be the alternative?
I think the first question is, where exactly are you in your process? Mm-hmm. And then it's about tailoring how you respond to that. So in many cases, it would be something more like a kind of, a show and tell session if they are a long way down the process, where we want to be involved, because where we believe we can add the most value, especially facilitation, is in those early stages, what we call discovery, for example, or problem definition, and then the early ideation.
And then I wonder, I think even if the decision is already made and they're at least to be transparent about that and then seeing, okay, is there any room for still some leverage to get ideas in or to get the others in, and then to facilitate maybe even just a conversation for buy-in and revealing what are the red flags that the others see with the decision could still be helpful, but then it's not a workshop that they need indeed.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else I can say on that one, really.
No need to. The other question, beside how do you convince them that it's not a workshop that they need, how do you prepare them for the after work? Because I think that's one of the big confusions many have. Oh, we have a workshop and then it's all hunky-dory and work will be beautiful. But actually the work only starts after the workshop. How do you get their buy-in and how do you prepare them for that?
It comes back to the conversations you need to have up front. So we need to, in a sense, interrogate, what's the purpose? What does success look like for you? And then we have to have a conversation that basically says a workshop could be a good solution, but it's part of a bigger journey that you're on. So we need to understand what's your commitment. What are your timeframes? Are they realistic for what we want to achieve? And as I said earlier, sometimes the conversation ought to be, you know what, we can't help you. That's the best solution in some cases, because otherwise to proceed on some kind of belief that everything's going to be fine in the future when you discover that the deadlines aren't quite as you thought, or the commitment to proceed in a service design methodology isn't really there. So it's an upfront adult conversation, but it very clearly has to position a workshop, an event where facilitation is required within a broader journey. So we need to be clear on what happens as a consequence of this. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the need for our involvement or the involvement of a facilitator thereafter? So it's a very open, honest conversation, I think, is the best way here. And, we've learnt how to do that by having all kinds of fails in the past as well. So it gets better, I would say.
I think personally, one thing that you could say really annoys me is you plan the best workshop in the world, you get to the best outcomes in the world as per previous agreement. And then as a service design team, we've got sponsorship and we've got outcomes, we've got next steps. And it's in that moment where accountability has to be transferred to the sponsor, right? And they need to own it. And at that point, because as a service design team, we're working on loads of different things, we're not accountable to move that forward because of the work that we're doing with other teams and kind of our involvement in that particular project. Now, if that accountability and ownership doesn't move forward, all of your good, hard, incredible work has gone down the drain, right? And so I think what we, like Rod said, ask ourselves is before we have those conversations and the workshop even starts, is how do you make sure that the right individuals are empowered and accountable to take it forward, right? Because otherwise, what are you doing it for?
And to make sure that they have everything they need and that they are present and take ownership from moment one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hello, listener. Are you tired of listening to my podcast voice praising our sponsor Session Lab in each episode? I think it's time to pass the mic over to you. So if you are as much of a Session Lab fan and user as I am, please share your experience and praise, and don't be shy of add a sentence of self-promo. Send me your soundbite and you might hear yourself on the next show and find your name and URL in the show notes. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.